My name is Dr. Terry Spurlock. I'm an Extension and Research Plant Pathologist with the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. And today we're at Lawnman Cotton Research Center in Marianna, Arkansas, talking about corn disease ID and management. So I happen to be standing in the middle of a corn research field. These are in plots. This is a population study done by Dr. Jason Kelly's lab, so I appreciate Jason lending me some space to do this disease ID and management talk today. Corn diseases in Arkansas are always a hot topic, especially for us extension specialists receiving calls during the year about, do I spray, when do I spray, how much disease should I have before I spray? And typically that's a conversation that we like to have, but we'd also love to have the conversation beforehand about planning for disease management, especially foliar disease management, before a seed ever goes in the ground. So some important fundamental things to understand about plant disease management in general are that to have disease, we have to have a susceptible host, meaning a susceptible host plant. The pathogen has to be present. So one of the diseases that we talk a lot about in the state of Arkansas on corn is southern corn rust, caused by a fungus called Puccinia polysora. Now that fungus is an obligate parasite, and so when we say obligate parasite, what we mean is it must exist on living plant tissue. And it doesn't overwinter here in the state of Arkansas, so it has to be blown in. And so there are some management considerations with respect to this particular disease. Also, the last and most important aspect of disease management is the environment. And the environment has to be conducive for disease development. This is the completed disease triangle. So by the time southern corn rust happens to blow in from the south, Louisiana, Texas, where it typically does overwinter, where it's a warmer climate, maybe there's earlier planted corn and the spores can infect and then produce more spores that produce what we would refer to as inoculum that blows north to our area. The environment has to be conducive for disease development. Now, we actually have some southern rust here, along with some other diseases in this field that I'm in. So the leaf I'm holding in my hand is southern rust, and southern rust has sort of a bright orangey red appearance. This leaf actually came from just below the ear leaf. This time of year, southern rust is quite present in a cornfield that's finishing up. What's diagnostic about southern rust and different than common rust, besides what you would see under a microscope, is that southern rust, one, has a brighter orange color than common rust, which is darker maroon or burgundy. And southern rust most often is only on one side of the leaf, where on the back side of the leaf we don't see any pustules and spores, but on the front side we would see pustules bearing spores to be disseminated. We recently had a grad student finish a project that was funded by the Arkansas Corn and Grain Sorghum Promotion Board, where the grad student, a master student named Justin Bailey, actually mapped the spatial distribution of southern rust in some fields in Arkansas. And what we found was that southern rust tended to build preferentially in areas that had a denser corn canopy. As an example, the image on the left represents the distribution of severity of southern rust in a field at about R4. The image at right is a normalized difference vegetation index calculated from a multispectral sensor mounted on an airplane and captured about a month earlier. These distributions agree, suggesting southern rust followed a spatial pattern of canopy density. And so we're not exactly sure why, but there's this idea that it's somewhat protected, and that possibly if you sought out these areas to scout corn, this might be preferential for your scouting and also might make you more efficient in the scouting process. So to sum up what we've talked about today is there's numerous corn foliar diseases in corn that we see every year in Arkansas. But typically the most important foliar disease that we see is southern rust. And we want to make sure of a few things. One, that we plan for scouting for southern rust during the year, and we know when we should scout for southern rust and when it's going to be important to control southern rust with a fungicide if need be. That's R3 or earlier. Second, we also want to understand what southern rust looks like relative to a similar looking disease called common rust, and not confuse the two, so that we're not spraying common rust thinking that it's southern rust.
A list of fungicides labeled for southern rust can be found in the MP154 publication, along with an efficacy chart indicating which products might be best to control that disease and others.
And lastly, we always want to understand that the extension specialists are here to help you. So give us a call should you have questions about plant disease identification. We also have a disease diagnostic clinic in Fayetteville, and samples can be sent there. But also questions about how much southern rust am I seeing and when do we need to apply a fungicide, or if we need to apply a fungicide to control that southern rust. Thank you.